Students, what is the dumbest reason you got kicked out of class? Story 1. Friend who was out sick borrows my notebook during lunch to get notes. He gives it back to me in that class later that day. Teacher sees him hand me the notebook and claims we're cheating. No test was going on or anything. She sends the two of us to the dean. As we walk in, he goes, "Mrs. F?" We nod yes, and he tells us to hang out in the cafeteria for a bit and then just go back to class and say we got detention to calm her down. But didn't go back to her class that day. Story 2. I was wearing a red shirt, which was against dress code, so I got sent to the principal's office. The lady at the desk told me to take my shirt off and I could go back to class, but I didn't have another shirt to change into. She couldn't seem to wrap her brain around the fact that me walking around in a bra would be worse than me walking around in a red shirt. She said if I was going to be difficult, then I could just sit there in the office for the rest of the day. So I sat there until she went on her lunch break, then I left and finished out the rest of my day wearing a red shirt. There were somehow no riots thrown on account of my red shirt, and the second half of my day was completely uneventful. Story 3. Junior year in high school, I got kicked out of class and almost was suspended because I used my cell phone to call 911 when a girl had a seizure in the middle of class. Our teacher jumped over a table and held her to keep her from trashing and sent another student to the office and told whoever had a phone to call an ambulance. Apparently, it violated some insurance clause the school had. Story 4. In Irish class, learned the word for storm was storm. I made a joke about the eye of the storm. Got 4 weeks detention. Story 5. Changing the brightness of a computer screen. I got sent out of class into detention because I was vandalizing school property. Story 6. Not me, but a classmate. He kicks open the door, throws his bag to his chair from the door before putting his arms in the air proudly, yelling, "Hello!" Teacher responds with, "Phil, get out." Still holding his hands up in the same jovial voice, yells, "Goodbye." Story 7. Kid had the hiccups and somehow this teacher had gone his entire life without learning about them. He thought the kid was mocking him or something, so he got dragged out of the class. You hear some mumbling through the door, and the teacher screams, "I know you have rights, Joseph." Story 8. Biology class 9th grade in mid-80s. Teacher stated that killer whales do not eat seals. Next day, I brought in a copy of a National Geographic magazine with a picture of a killer whale eating a seal. Instead of thanking me for correcting his mistake, the teacher sent me to the principal's office. Story 9. I didn't get kicked out, but I got banned from school computers for a while for having the audacity to clean out a super dirty ball mouse. Apparently fixing something is the same as stealing the ball. Story 10. My body once initiated the a part of my sneeze at an incredibly high volume, but the chew failed to follow. So it looked like I just randomly screamed my head off in the middle of class. Story 11. Over the pronunciation of my name. The only time I ever got kicked out of a class was in junior year of high school. The sub we had that day that I believe was for anatomy was having trouble pronouncing my full name. Indian name problems. I spoke up, said the correct pronunciation, and she snapped and said, "Oh, you want to get smart with me?" Says my name wrong again and kicks me out. Story 12. Professor. The government has never successfully kept a secret. Me. How would you know? Apparently that derailed his whole lesson. I got kicked out. Story 13. I forgot a paper lantern we were using for Chinese New Year art project at home. Got chewed out and my character picked apart in front of my entire class by 2 teachers. Cried and got kicked out. To clarify, I was 10 years old and very much not in college. This was an undergraded side project that was supposed to be fun. Story 14. Writing HTML for IT class in English, our teacher saw it and declared loudly to the class and librarian that me and my friend, also writing HTML, were hacking the school. Still didn't believe us after we showed her our half-finished work. Stupid. Story 15. When I was in 1st grade, I got an in-school suspension for reading a book that was too many grade levels above everyone else's books, and I was making them feel bad. Not because I was saying that I was a better reader than them, or smarter than them, or anything. Simply because the book I was reading was considered to be a higher grade level. As far as I can tell or remember, no other student had an issue with it. Regardless, it's a ridiculous reason, and really shows off the educational system of the USA. Story 16. In grade 9 French, my friend got kicked out for speaking like Batman all class. The teacher goes into the hall and we hear her saying, "Are you ready to behave?" My friend says, "The Batman is always ready." Our teacher just comes back in and shuts the door. Story 17. After sending someone out in class, the teacher asked, "Does anyone else want to be sent outside?" Me. Raise his hand. Story 18. Some kid stole a communication radio during my PE summer class in high school. The teacher said he wouldn't let any of us leave until it was found, as it was worth couple $100, he claims. Well, a buddy of mine saw this kid hide it, and being fed up waiting, I encouraged him to tell the teacher. I went with him so nobody would necessarily know who told. Sure enough, they found the radio, and the teacher confronted the kid. Here's where it gets weird. The kid started getting violent. like screaming how he's going to literally kill my buddy and I, even explaining his method he will use. The assistant PE teacher gets us and takes us to another classroom across campus and explains they need to call the police and maybe send us home. Turns out this kid has a record already. He's been on trial for attempted murder of a girlfriend and violence of past friends, so the teachers were told not to take his threats lightly. After camping out in this random classroom for a couple of hours, we were taken to the vice principal's office. He explained the situation and said to avoid putting us in further danger, we were given A's for the class and told to have a great rest of our summer. It was the kid's stupidity that got me kicked out, but I'm not complaining. Story 19. Math teacher told the class the next person who spoke during her lecture would get sent out. Somebody in my group started talking. I told him to shut up. I got sent to sit in the class next door. Later in the semester, I got like a 20% on my end-of-year project because there were things she wanted that she had only explained while I was out of the class. Story 20. Not something that happened to me, but a classmate once got punished for saying he doesn't understand something. The teacher just yelled at him that she's tired of him saying he doesn't understand stuff when he gets good grades in tests. I was just sitting there thinking, what the f***? Maybe he gets good grades because he's not afraid to ask when he doesn't understand something? It was a pretty shitty reaction from her, and I remember feeling bad for not saying something. Story 21. For knowing my real last name. My parents have bad handwriting, so my last name, Rose, looks like Ross. I just moved to a new state. This was a new school. On the first day, the teacher was doing attendance and said, Ross, so I didn't respond. She then asked why I didn't raise my hand. I told her my real last name. She thought I was lying, then sent me to the principal's. I was in 4th grade, so I knew my real last name. The principal called the parents and learned I wasn't an idiot, so they sent me back. The teacher didn't apologize. Story 22. Answering my mobile phone before the lecture started to let a fellow classmate know where the hall was. Everyone was talking amongst themselves and the lecturer said, don't answer your phone when I'm at the front of the class, even if the lecture hasn't started, and sent me outside. She said she would come outside to get me. I just left. Story 23. In bio, the teacher was discussing animal behaviors, and I asked why cats wiggle their butts before they pounced. Genuine question, but my teacher didn't want anything to do with it. She sent me out of the room and I just about cried, considering I'm basically never sent out. The deputy principal came down the corridor and I was like, oh sh**. He asked why I wasn't in the room and I explained. He laughed and answered my question, then sent me back in. I was pretty embarrassed and afraid to ask questions in that class for a while, but at least I know why cats wiggle their butts before they pounce. So how do cats wiggle their butts before they pounce? Story 24. A kid was sitting by himself at lunch, so I told him to pull up a seat with me and all my buddies. The new Spanish teacher who has broken English walks over and says there are too many people at the table and someone has to move. I explained the situation, but she wouldn't budge. She was met with a resistance when we started chanting, "Let him stay," while lightly banging on the table. Next thing I know, my history teacher tells me and my one buddy to step outside and rips us apart because the Spanish teacher told him we said, "You're a woman, we'll do what we want." We were like, what the f***? Explained it to my history teacher and he was cool with it and apologized to us. Story 25. Sub sent me out for smiling. This was year 7. I walked into the classroom smiling, not talking, not anything. She says that I need to stop smiling, but I just can't. I got spoken to and sent out that day. Story 26. I fell asleep in CCD, and when the nun asked what my excuse was, I said, because God told me to. Story 27. I had a bald teacher once who was spouting about being a millionaire and I said something along the lines of, "What'd you do? Sell your hair?" And he kicked me out. Story 28. In my econ class, we did a tower out of marshmallows and toothpicks challenge. Very few points were given for it standing up on its own. Mainly it was height. So I built essentially a cell phone tower, wide at the base, one toothpick at the top. I would have won the competition by an absolute landslide and broke the class record, but the teacher called it a spire and not a tower. Next day, I brought examples of towers in construction that looked exactly like what I built. He sent me out of the class, so I just went home instead. Story 29. My IT teacher was absent on a trip, so we had a substitute to basically make sure the class didn't blow itself up. We had small discussions, and in one of them, we were talking about Windows Office programs. I made a statement that there were free versions of the Office apps for tablets and such mobile users. The sub butted into the conversation and called me a liar. No exaggeration. I was a dirty liar who didn't know what I was talking about. She'd been using Windows for so many years and blah blah blah. It took me 3 seconds to pull it up on my phone and show her Microsoft's official website talking about it. Boom. Detention for insubordination. Story 30. As far as I can tell, walking into the classroom, I had a 7th grade math teacher who didn't like me for some reason. One day I walked into her classroom and she immediately turned to me and told me to go to the discipline dean's office. To this day, I still don't know why. The discipline dean didn't know why I was sent there either. This actually happened twice. I also got sent to the discipline dean's office once for wearing a woodchuck draft cider shirt to school Teacher quoted some made-up rule about kids wearing clothing that prompted drinking and sent me out. The discipline dean disagreed with her, let me hang out in her office for the rest of the period, then sent me on my way, still wearing the shirt. It wasn't an actual school rule. Story 31. Once I walked into class, sat down in my chair, then leaned against the wall, and then got sent out. I'd been in the classroom for 1 minute and didn't even say a word or unpack my backpack and managed to get myself sent out for leaning against the wall. Story 32. A new lax math teacher had let us do whatever we wanted for a few weeks until he was told to get his class under control. While I was late to class one day, he sat down with my classmates to speak to them about respect and getting work done. The exact moment everyone settled down and there was a mutual understanding, I bustled through the door with my best Fonzie impersonation. No sooner had my "Ayy" resounded through the classroom, I found myself in the dean's office. Story 33. 1982. Pom-pom practice in 7th grade. Our part of the squad was supposed to be doing something lame while the coach worked with another part. I was burping the alphabet. Coach lost her when I burped out the perfect W, and she kicked me out of practice while the rest of my squad could not stop laughing. Story 34. The day before Christmas vacation, half the kids who attended the high school aren't there. I was standing outside my math class next to my teacher talking to a female friend of mine who was leaving for a few days. The bell starts to ring and I give her a hug and go to step into class right behind the last student in, and the bell stops ringing. The math teacher tells me I'm now late and to report to the principal's office to get a late slip or I can come into the class. This is a remedial math class. People show up stoned halfway through the class all the time and it's never been an issue. So I go, I was right here. You let so-and-so in and I was 2 feet behind him. She says, the bell stopped ringing before you were inside the classroom. You're late. Go get a late slip. So naturally, I said, okay, and walked right past the principal's office on my way out the door to start my Christmas vacation early. Story 35. In 5th grade, my buddy and I got sent out because we fist bumped each other. I believe the teacher called it encouraging violence among the younger students. She had a short temper. Story 36. Okay, so this takes some explaining. It's nobody's fault but mine, and I was being dumb, but still I felt terrible. So the first time I got kicked out of this class was in 9th grade. I was in AP Human Geography, and we were learning about how some farmers grow their products in different ways. Teacher. And that's why some farmers specialize in 1 or 2 products, and some grow all kinds of stuff. So you're saying these commercial farmers specialize in a few products. Teacher. That's right. Me. Whispers to friends. Kind of like how I specialize in mad. My voice cracked. The whole class heard me. I look at everyone behind me, hoping to find people laughing and possibly getting out of the situation. Instead, everyone sat there silently. I'm in 11th grade and still haven't lived it down. There are kids who I will meet for the first time and they will be like, oh my god, you're the mad guy. And I don't know what to do, so I'll just play it off like a celebrity. Yeah, that's me. Story 37. Hiccups. When I was in 5th grade, we had this new teacher at the school, and probably new to teaching too, to whom we were not really nice to. I don't get them that often, but when I do, I get really loud and long hiccups. So we were in class and she was trying to explain something, and I kept making hiccup noises. She kicked me out because she thought I was faking it to annoy her. She didn't last long at her school. Story 38. One day my teacher said, bring snacks for the test on Friday since we'll be having lunch in class. Just don't bring those goldfish with the extra dust on them. Can't think of what they're called. Me. Flavor blasted? Teacher. Y'all know what I'm talking about. There's regular and that other kind. Me. They're called flavor blasted. The teacher, who's still oblivious to me talking, says, anyways, just don't bring those extra powdered goldfish. And also, no open bottles of water, they have to be unopened. I start speaking in full volume but no yelling, saying, flavor blasted. The teacher then looks at me pissed. What did you say, Nathan? She says. I say, flavor blasted, that's what they're called. To which she replied, that is not what you said. Go to the office, you'll be receiving a write-up. Story 39. My chemistry teacher was a fully bald man, and when he fired up a Bunsen burner for demonstration, I recommend he be careful not to singe his hair. I did not pass go, did not collect 200 pounds. Story 40. I kicked a pebble once. I got in trouble with 2 school principals of 2 different schools for destroying discovery property. There was a rock on the sidewalk and I kicked it about 3 feet. Before I knew it, some obese, bald guy was standing over me. He dragged me to the principal's office and said that I destroyed property of the school. The principal was mad and called the principal of my school. I even had to take the bus from my actual school to another school and then back to my house. I got in trouble at my own school too. Story 41. 4th grade. Kicked out of class by a teacher from a separate room. While walking back from the bathroom, I sneezed. The kind of full-body sneeze where your torso bends so far forward, it looks like you're trying to touch your toes. I sneezed while walking past the door of another classroom. I sit down in my classroom as the teacher from the other room walks in and says, I was doing flips in the hallway. I'm a short, pudgy kid with the coordination of a drunk toddler. I can barely somersault, let alone execute such a feat of gymnastic prowess. And yes, she was a portly elderly lady with very thick glasses. Story 42. High school health class. On Thursday, the teacher flips out over something trivial and proceeds to go on a rant about how he will no longer tolerate this behavior, ending his speech with, "There's a new sheriff in town." On Friday, my buddy and I show up to class with plastic sheriff badges pinned to our chests. Took him about 5 minutes to notice, and the look on his face was nothing short of pure resentment. Needless to say, we were kicked out for the remainder of the class. Story 43. I once got kicked out for getting hit by a paper airplane that was thrown at me. The teacher looked back just as the thing came crashing into my head, and by some seriously inadequate detective work, thought that I must have been the one to throw it. I was given no time to explain and was sent out of the class for the rest of the period. Story 44. I had a friend who was sent out for class for sneezing like 5 times in a row. The teacher thought he was making fun of her. The kid just had the flu. Story 45. First off, I said this in good humor, and the people I said this to knew I wasn't intending on offending anyone. In acting class, we had to pretend we were at an airport, and one of us worked at the check-in desk. As soon as we were told this, I immediately went over to a guy in my group who's from Brazil and said, "Sir, we're kicking you out of the country because you moved here illegally." My group and I are laughing like maniacs for 10 minutes easily, and I keep saying words like deportation to keep the laughter going. When we had to play out our scene in front of everyone, we kept giggling and I whispered, "Are we getting deported for this?" Then my lecturer said, "Why don't you take 5 minutes out of class?" and made me walk out whilst everyone watched me. I was at university when this happened. Sounds a bit like bullying to me. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this next video. The YouTube algorithm really thinks you like it.